Hey guys, welcome to Passing Under Yellow. This will be episode number 2. If you listen to episode number 1, we talked to the young Ben Ollie. Ben, say hi to everybody.
Hello, everyone.
And we talked a little bit about making that transition from DE, like he did, to your first Wheelie Wheel race. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit more, kind of some stuff people don't really like to talk about, which is money and the legal aspect of going racing. Now, going racing is a fun time. It's great. You'll make memories of your life. But there is some money aspect that goes into this. And sometimes, as it goes, shit happens. So we're going to talk a little bit about actually, finding a team for the series that you may want to cut your teeth in for, say, an arrive and drive. B, when you find a team, more than likely, actually, I hope you will, you'll sign a contract for should something happen during a race. And see, we'll talk a little about the costs and kind of some of the various things out there. All this stuff is pretty public knowledge. There's going to be a little bit different things. Now, we are not attorneys, so if you do have any contractual questions about what you're going to sign, find the appropriate place for that. So first off, this would not be possible without the support of our friends at Hawk Racing and Hawk Brake Pads. So everything I've ever driven, these guys have pretty much provided me a pad. The one I have here is HB149D, which I've stolen from the part shelf for an NA Miata front. So at some point, I guess I'll be racing on these. So John Butler, everyone at Hawk, thank you guys for supporting our show here and trying to get more people into wheel racing. So we'll just jump right in. Ben Ollie, so you signed a contract with Mike Gorman. Did you read it?
I skimmed over it because once I started looking at all the costs that could add up if I crashed the car, I was like, I need to sign this before I get in too far into my head and I'm doing 4-minute laps.
So for disclosure, I do. I guess I'm an employee of Open Throttle Racing, so a lot of things you'll hear me say will relate to our contract for Champ Car and for our WRL car. So we'll just start from the top. If you decide, hey, you're a red group, you're an advanced driver, and it's time for you to go racing, fantastic. I'm all about it. That's why we started this show, to help you guys make that jump. So if it were me, I'd probably, if I have no racing experience at all, like we did at VIR a couple weekends ago, probably go somewhere like the Champ Car. If you're on the West Coast, the Lucky Dog Racing League, Kathy Fuss and the team there, they have a fantastic, really good grassroots series. Obviously, there's the World Racing League, which is kind of where I've been racing the past couple years, and RJ and those guys, fantastic amateur endurance series. But, again, there's some costs involved in this, so it is a little budget dependent, but I would start off in one of those lower, grassroots series. Now, I'm not big on club racing. I have raced with NAS and the SCCA, and not bashing them, but you might decide to go do some sprint racing there and get an SCCA license or a NASA license. But for my experience, and I know I kind of put you on the path, Ben, I like going amateur endurance racing, and so we'll just kind of say, theoretically, you want to go Champ Car racing and beyond. Now, you can log on to the Champ Car forum. You can log on to the WRL forum. Lucky Dog, everyone has these groups on Facebook, and you can say, hey, I'm looking for a seat. And I guarantee you can find a seat probably in about 10 minutes because one of the owners will probably ping you and ask some questions. Now, when you select a seat, obviously there's some costs involved. You paid $1,500 for your 2 stints in a Miata. You ended up getting a little more than that because it was a longer race. I think our current rate right now for NOLA was $1,650. And so this is for an entry level and a MX-5 that you'll probably get 2 stints a race on. So about, give or take, 2 hours plus a little bit of practice time. Seats in Champ Car, and you can look it up, will go anywhere from $500 to $700 a stint in the case of beer to upwards of $4,000 for, a faster Class D car. And you can look across the board if you decide to go to WRL, which has become more or less I guess everyone will agree, is kind of like a semi-pro series now. You can go anywhere from $3,500 to an NCU Cup car, which is kind of like what my other guys at AOA Racing, that's more or less kind of the budget there for a GP3 car. And then upwards of $12,000 and above to race in a GT4 car or a TCR car, one of the GTO level cars in WRL, which is actually kind of a good deal because if I told you kind of what IMSA costs would be, you would be shocked. So cost is going to range depending on what team you get, the quality of team. There are teams in Champ Car that you will show up and do full arrive and drive, and you will get damn near pro hospitality, IMSA level hospitality. You show up, there's food, there's a lounge, there's a $1 million hauler. That's not uncommon in Champ Car. Then there's kind of mid-level operations, kind of like ours. We have a nice trailer, and Amy makes some fantastic snacks.
The best breakfast burritos I've ever
we
had.
have the best barbecue in the paddock. I'll live and die by that. So there is differences in what you do. Now, a lot of guys, even when I started, you might have a group of friends, and you guys all chip in some cash. You have a car that has occasion, and you go racing, and that's great too. Now, the one unfortunate thing about racing is I've lost a lot of friends in racing over costs associated with racing. So kind of just use that. I mean, use some caution. If you're going to go into business with a group of buddies and you're all going to split the cost, what does that actually mean, split the cost? Whose truck are you using? What happens if your buddy crashes the car? What does he owe? What do you owe if somebody can't come work on the car? So use some caution. I know a lot of guys that have a group of friends that get together and build a car and have the time of their lives. But I also know a bunch of guys that have a group of friends that have completely alienated each other and hate each other over racing, and that's something that's pretty sad. So there is a couple things besides the hospitality. Is do you want to be competitive? And again, having done this for a long time, it is very hard to go out there and win in an arrive and drive car. And what I mean by that is, again, for arrive and drive teams, this is a business. And you could have 4 very safe, qualified drivers that the team is vetted, and they're going to be fine. Nothing bad is going to happen, but there could be a spread of 5 seconds among those drivers. So you kind of experience this, Ben. Again, I started the race at the 24, and we had a pretty good lead.
Yeah.
And, that lead slowly started to bleed out over the course of the day.
It did a little bit.
So, and then you could have a group of guys that, do this for fun, or the same group of guys that do this every single weekend, and they gel together and they formed a good team. So, performance and arrive and drive is a little hit or miss, because you don't really know who you might be driving with. And there's always going to be, it is amateur club racing, amateur endurance racing. There is always going to be some disparity amongst the drivers, just simply on experience. So, kind of, whenever you sign up for a team, just realize that you're going to be driving with people that might not be at your level. They might be at a much higher level. They might be at a much lower level. So don't live and die by who are you driving with, because you might miss out on a really good opportunity to run with some really fun guys and learn a lot if you do that. So, again, another tip I have is look at the team. So let's say Ben has a car, and I look at your results, and you've DNF'd the last 7 Champ Car races. That might not be the best place to go spend my money. Mm-hmm. Now, if I see you finished mid-pack or above, maybe had a DNF here, maybe you did well here, well, that means, hey, maybe he's going to try to keep the car running for the course of that. So, again, you've seen with Open Throttle, I mean, again, we come pretty well prepared. We have spare engines, we have mechanics on duty.
Yep.
So that's questions you can ask, hey, I'm looking to buy a Series team. How many mechanics do you have? Am I supposed to be crewing? Because a lot of times on smaller teams, you might be a driver, but you're going to also be expected to help refuel the car and, and help service the car. So a couple things are going to go into that as you're researching your teams that you want to sign with. Obviously, there's the cost. Some teams go by certain stints. So I might buy 2 stints for $700 a stint, and that's my expectation. I might sign, for $2,000 a weekend and to get approximately 2 hours of drive time. But some teams, that's always going to be a little different because, again, there's red flags involved. There's yellows. We had like 90 hours of Code 60 at the last WRL race where you really weren't really driving. So it's just a matter of what your expectations are on time. How many drivers you're going to drive with? I used to drive with a team, and I had the time of my life, and we did very well. But there was 5 drivers for like a 5-hour race, so we all got like 1 hour apiece. And again, I was okay with it because I knew that before I went in. But if I went in going thinking, hey, I'm going to write this check and I'm going to get 3 hours in this race, I would have been very disappointed. So, when you find a team that's a potential candidate, ask those questions. Are you prepared to fix the car? Am I crewing? Do you have a crew? Again, how many hours can I expect? Obviously, there's going to be some, stuff happens in racing. The car might be down. What happens if you get there and the car blows up and you don't get to drive? Do you get your money back? Does you get a credit? So all these things you want to find out before you commit to a team for a race. So kind of going back to your contract issue, I will tell you a little about what it said in that contract.
Yeah.
So, again, this is racing. Even though we're racing cars that don't have the highest value in amateur endurance racing, you still kind of, there is a financial risk at this, and a lot of people glaze over this, when they want you to go racing, and I understand why. And there's nothing more in my life. There's nothing that I've enjoyed more than being in motorsport and being involved in racing. But again, I'll be the first to say I've written checks for stuff I've busted up, and it's never enjoyable. So you find a team, and they're going to ask you to sign a contract. And truthfully, that's to protect you and to protect the team, because again, you're getting into their equipment. And just to give you an outline of what most contracts say, you'll be responsible for any damage that car incurs if you're in the car. So that doesn't mean you crashed the car. That could mean somebody ran into you. And some of the most hard to swallow things I've ever seen is people getting charged for people getting run into. But that's one of the risks you're going to take by arriving and driving a car. So then if you got smashed by somebody, you'd probably be on the hook for that.
Oh yeah, and you got to be careful too, because sometimes you can get a little bit too aggressive, and you can be the one to cause the damage. And so not only are you on the hook for the damage that you caused to the car, you can get yourself pulled out of that car for good for the rest of the race, and your money kind of goes down the drain. So you kind of got to set your expectations there for your own skill level.
I mean,
bet yourself.
You're right. I mean, again, I've been on that side of somebody damages the car and we had to pull them out of the car, not because we want to, but A, to protect our equipment, and B, to get their mind right and say, hey man, we don't want you to get hurt, because you're out there making mistakes. So contracts, again, will have several things. You're responsible for damage. Some of them have damage limits. I've seen contracts that say, hey, you're expected to pay, X amount. Now, this is where agreed upon car value comes into play. And again, too, I'm only going off of the ones that I've seen. Please read any contract you get with any team. But, again, you might be jumping into a GT4 car that if that car gets totaled, which I have seen, again, you could be on the hook for $175,000 versus, a Miata where if you total it out, it might be 30 grand. So you kind of need to know, just because you can afford the seat, which is obviously important, could you theoretically pay for this car if something tragic were to happen? So that's one thing that you need to figure out. What is this car agreed upon value? The other thing is a lot of teams have started to offer insurance, which I think is a fantastic thing. So one of the teams I run with, you pay $1,000, whatever it is, and your max exposure is $8,000, for instance. So kind of find out beforehand, because you don't want to crash the car, then find out insurance was offered. Say, hey, team owner, do you guys offer an insurance policy on this that will limit my exposure on that? So that's one of the questions. Are they going to inspect the car and then invoice you for any potential damage? And then you might want to find out certain aspects of what damage means. I mean, again, unfortunately, I know on an Audi RS3 TCR, one of the headlights is about $1,800. Don't ask me how I know. So it's just, again, you kind of want to know what you're signing up for. And it is okay to ask these questions, because you are signing a legal document and you are spending money, and you are, at the same time, you are doing business, which obviously this is the most fun you're probably ever going to have, but you are doing business. So you need to kind of step back and, put your legal cap on and make sure that what you're about to commit to makes sense. Now, if you get a team and it's not uncommon in racing, because in racing there are such good people and they want to do everything by a handshake, that's okay if you're comfortable with it, but just realize if something were to go amiss, again, where does that leave you? People get sued all the time in racing. Again, that's just, again, we are running businesses here. So kind of use that. Your mileage may vary about what kind of experience you have. And the same thing goes for even if it's just you and a bunch of buddies. I know a couple of my friends that do that model just fine, but they've all signed contracts, so they know kind of what happens. And if, heaven forbid somebody were to get injured, who's liable for what. So kind of step back for a minute. You're excited, you're ready to go racing, but let's use a little bit of some common sense here and kind of read what you're signing. And like anything else, I mean, you are a consumer, so do some shopping around, find out where the best value for your money is on a team, where you're going to get the most time, and then again, kind of like you, Ben, you're with us, and if you want to get into an entry level team, can you grow with this team? So if you're signing on a team and they've got one, Miata, you're probably only going to ever forever drive that one Miata because that's all they have, versus you sign on with somebody like an Open Throttle, where we have that, we have an E46, we have WRL cars,
Yep.
We have a bunch of stuff. So kind of use some judgment there whenever you sign up, with your teams. Ask a lot of questions. It's okay to ask questions, and be 100% comfortable whenever you jump into that car. So I guess again, to kind of go back to the cost aspect of this. Again, what can you expect to drive? So in Champ, the numbers are all over the board for this. So for ours, it's under $2,000. Let's say to drive an Miata.
Yep.
You can start looking at E46s and 944s, so probably in that $2,500 to $3,000 range, and then any more than that, you're talking Class D cars like Mustangs, and the WRL scene. GP3 cars, $3-4 grand, and unfortunately things are starting to creep up in there too. GP2 cars and above are somewhere in the fours, and then GP1 cars are 5 to 6, and then GTO cars by then you're anywhere from $6,000 to $12,000 for a weekend. So look around to kind of decide what you want to drive, and it is okay to drive. Again, I've got a bunch of people that we drive with, and one weekend they'll drive an M2, one weekend they'll drive a Miata, one weekend they'll drive this. So it's okay to shop around and kind of look around as far as what you're going to drive and experience all the different cars. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. But I mean, I'll ask you, again, when you sign the contract, do you, now that you're more educated on it, again, what's your opinion? Are you ready to sign more contracts?
Oh, definitely, because after participating in the first race, you see why those contracts are written like that. The 24-hour race at VIR, there was so much carnage, whether it be some of the drivers' faults or just, the car braking, they hit a wall, or just, aggressive driving. It's just, there's a ton of risk that these, basically a business has to incur to be able to field these cars. So it's very reasonable, the contracts and stuff that they write. It's just worth, kind of exploring that race team and, making sure that you're going to get your money's worth, because if I didn't, have Open Throttle Racing, let's say they didn't exist, I would be walking through the paddock, probably crewing at races and trying to see, what all these other race teams have to offer and doing all these things that you suggested.
Yeah. And so I'm going to flip the switch a little bit here, because we talked about what you should be looking at as a renter, as a consumer. But as being on the other side of that and working with team owners and being on teams, there's a such thing as being a good renter. And our day job is we're in retail automotive, so
Yep.
we've fired customers.
Oh my God.
We just don't want to do business with certain people.
Fun feeling sometimes.
Yeah, and so I think the same applies, because this is business, and there is, what does being a good renter mean? Again, being a good client. And again, some of my best friends in the world are people I've met in racing, and have been clients of whatever teams I was with that weekend. For instance, you've seen, we've been at the IMSA level and had this issue. Like, you want to, if the team says, "Hey, be here at 10:30,"
be there, for the love of God. Just
10:30.
be there.
Funny story. I've been racing in IMSA, and I had to get back in the car unprepared because our arrive and drive racer never arrived on time, and it really, really kind of damaged our race. But again, be prompt. Again, so yes, you are paying money to be there, and yes, you're paying money to have a good time. But there is also, this is like a timed competitive sport, and so be there on time. Listen to what they say. Again, I'll be the first one to admit I've broken this rule a couple times, but if we say, hey, don't over rev the motor to 6,500 RPM. Well, if you're banging off the limiter every single lap, you probably shouldn't do that because we're asking you to conserve our equipment. If we tell you, hey, if you have contact, bring the car in, don't hit the curbs. Listen, I know stuff's gonna happen out there in the track. I'm the first one that sometimes I drive pretty aggressively, but when we ask you, if we're a team and we ask you to do something, again, it's a good business for you to kind of follow some of our rules. Be prompt. I can't tell you how many times I've had an issue at a racetrack where, again, as from the team aspect of it, and you might even experience where some of the renters are a little rude
Oh yeah.
to the crew. And, Mike Gorman is very, he's very upfront about this, and I have his back, anytime if I have to do it myself. It's like, if you're rude to the crew, you're just not going to be invited back. We're just not going to have it.
Those guys work so incredibly hard.
And you've been you've been on crews,
And just because you pay doesn't mean you're above them or anything. They're literally the glue that holds that team together.
They might be keeping you alive when they do a brake pad change.
100%, 100%.
So when you go onto a team and yes, you're paying money, and again, you should have some expectations as a customer. I've done it. I've had certain and again, I've been on teams where the expectations weren't met, and it's disappointing. But at the same time, there should be some expectations from you as a renter. Even though you're paying there, you are essentially a race car driver that weekend, and you're doing a job. And again, if the crew asks certain things of you to do to the car, you should be obliged to do them. So I'll leave it at that. I do want to touch on some of the risks involved in doing this because I'm pretty thankful. Obviously, you've done a bunch of track days and Ds. I've, as of late, had a bunch of friends be involved in some pretty gnarly crashes. Stuff that really makes me take pause. I think that, again, when every time you get into that car, and I think I've conveyed this to you before, that just realize things could go wrong pretty quickly.
Yep.
And so, before after you sign the check, after you met the team, after you're comfortable in the car, take a little pause every time. I mean, I've seen some, ferocious crashes in Miatas. And these are cars that have 110 horsepower on a good day. And so, again, even though, when you make that transition from track days, which I've seen some nasty stuff happen at track days and Ds. Me and you have seen cars get totaled.
Yeah, seen some crazy stuff.
Now you add in the fact that you're racing. Really think about this. And so, not to sound dramatic about it, but for instance, again, I have a will because, if I do something dumb, if I'm at Daytona in a Miata and I make a mistake, I'm going 125 miles an hour. If I hit the wrong way, I might not survive that. So, again, I do have a will ready to go. I always tell people I have emergency contacts. And so it's the stuff like that you never hope you have to do, but we are racing. Have your affairs in order, not to sound really grim, but, I found out my work-life policy doesn't cover, a lot of racing stuff. So,
oh, wow, that's a big deal.
So, you might want to find out if you have a family, does your life insurance cover this? Should you have, that 1 in 1 million hit the wrong way? Or if you get, or if you're in the hospital because you've broken your legs, or whatever the case is. So, again, that's one thing as long as I've been racing, people don't really like to talk about this. And even if it's amateur racing, should something go wrong, which again, the cars are very safe. Again, there's, you have immense safety equipment, even in Lemons, the safety equipment requirements are very high. But yeah, just have your affairs in order. Again, I always tell my parents or, people, family members, hey, I'm racing in Tulsa, Oklahoma this weekend. Should something happen to me, that's where I'm going to be this weekend, So, I think that, again, once you have the money in order, once you have the team in order, once you have that, I don't ever want to think you shouldn't have the time of your life in this, but you should. But, you might want to spend an hour before, your first race or any race you're going to do and get your affairs in order. Say, hey, here's where I'm going to be. Do you have your health insurance card on you? Is this going to be covered by your life policy? So, it's weird stuff like that where, unlike golf or whatever weird hobby, if something should go wrong, you might have a little bit of a problem. So I don't know. I mean, you're young, you don't have a family yet.
Yeah, I don't have a will in order, that's for sure, but this is, probably something I should do at some
Yeah.
point if I'm gonna, keep doing this. It makes sense because
Yeah, I mean,
there's a risk
I
out
know,
there.
I know it sounds really dramatic. Like, oh my God, Gino's telling you guys to go get wills when you go racing. Which, again, you don't have to. Again, this
Yeah.
is this is a personal thing. I don't have a wife or kids like that, but again, if something were to happen to me, I just want to make sure everything's kind of like done and settled. So
I just got to make sure my mom doesn't sell my Supra for $4,000 as
yeah,
some
I
old
mean that
Toyota.
that's a real real cost. So again, I know people don't like to talk about it, but again, even the amateur racing is getting so popular, and it's fantastic, and I think it's great for the sport. But as we have more and more people in there, your incident risk, kind of does come up just a little bit. So have your affairs in order. We went over, the contracts. Please read the contracts. Went over the money. Make sure that you're doing the right things with your money, because I don't think very many people watching this are gonna get paid to go racing. If you do, man, I'm all about it. Congratulations, you can consider yourself a professional race car driver. But for the rest of us, again, we're gonna be paying in some shape or form to go racing. So just make sure your dollar is gonna go the farthest way. Again, there is nothing worse than writing a check, going racing, not having a good time. Because then you just get bitter about the whole thing, and just it's kind of ruined what should be a good experience for you. So, and again, I think that's a good way to handle that too. Should you go and you have a bad experience with a team, it's okay to say, hey, listen, guys, I'm gonna go try. I mean, you start to become friends with these guys, so you might sign up for a team for 3 or 4 races, and it's just not working out because you're not finishing races, or again, you don't like the guys on the team. It's okay to kind of shop around and kind of network a little bit there, and find the right team. Some resources for that. Again, obviously we're always available. But if you're out there and you want to sign on to a team and you want to find someone local, ask around, ask at your local track day, your local DE, and say, hey, does anyone here race? And more than likely somebody will be doing that. Get their opinion on who you should call. Word of mouth in racing is, probably the best way to find, things like that to sign on with. So, I think we covered most of that. We covered the insurance. One other nice thing about Arrive and Drive Racing, and I'll kind of end it with this, is one of the services a lot of the teams offer will be having a pro driver or a coach on staff. I mean, there's some like really, really, really high names that we've seen in a WRL paddock,
Oh, yeah.
providing coaching. So, if you want to improve your craft, which again, if you made that transition from DEs to doing wheel to wheel, and you want to develop racecraft and you want to get faster, getting coaching is that's a huge step. I know several pro coaches. Obviously, my teammates, Patrick Wilmot and IMSA and Andrew, they've made careers out of coaching. But a lot of these teams will offer that as an add-on. So again, you might go to WRL and sign on with a team, and they'll offer a coach that will review your data with you every single weekend. So, kind of on the other aspect of that, find out is coaching available? Because many of the teams, you'll show up and you just jump in the car and you do the best you can. Maybe you can look at the aim, but some of the other teams will offer that as an option. So that's one thing I will say out there. That's a huge thing besides hospitality. If you're going to start spending a lot of money on there, if they have a pro coach on staff, certainly, see if that can help you a little bit and see if you can have access to that. So, I'll leave it at that. Check the forums, ask around, and just make sure that, you feel comfortable before you sign anything or sign any checks. You want to add anything to that as a customer?
As a customer, I think it's really important to try and be a good renter, because you want to be invited back to do that. And I think there are some teams out there who know this themselves, that they're always going to be kind of that entry level team.
Yeah.
There's definitely some champ car teams out there. And so building good rapport with your team and your teammates and stuff is super important, because at some point when you do get better and you want to maybe transition to a different racing team that, is a little bit higher pedigree, it's going to be important, when those other race teams, hear that you want to rent with them, they can go to some of those other, teams and say like, hey, is this driver, going to wreck my car? Are they going to give us any issues and stuff like that? So it's just good, and, not to try and go in there with a big head or an ego, just be a team player. But I think being a good renter is super important for sure.
Well, and I think, that's one of the things I'm proud about is I've had you on enough crews.
Oh, yeah.
Where you see that when things break down and you got to fix them, first, you're never going to be competitive if you're breaking cars.
Yeah.
Again, again, you've seen, in the past, Miata transmissions, they break if you're too, how many times do you hear me yell at guys, please be careful with our transmissions?
Yeah.
And like 3 laps later, transmission's broken. Yeah, it's like, oh, fuck you.
And you also don't want to be that guy who, sometimes has a short fuse. You want to try and be calm and collected because,
they're talking about you, Scott Levitt. I love you though, but we're talking, I think attitude, because again, it's like we said, this is a team sport. So if you can have a good attitude, even when things are going completely bananas and and shit's breaking and everyone's upset, if you can have a good attitude, again, no one's coming to sign us for, to drive a GTD car next year.
Right.
So it should be fun. And some of the most fun weekends I've had is when the race went to complete shit. Like the car broke down. We're putting it together with zip ties, and that should be part of the fun. I mean, not to say you need to go struggle every weekend, but when you have a team that can come together and overcome some adversity, whether it's a broken car, an accident, I think you'll agree. Some of the best memories we have is overcoming this stuff in racing.
It's fun. It makes for fantastic stories.
Yeah. Like you changing my transmission before Petit Le Mans and sleeping in your truck at Lake Lanier.
I got 2 hours of sleep. That was an insane ordeal.
What was it you told me? I slept in my truck, Gino. I said, yeah, but you get to tell people you slept at Lanier Raceway.
Exactly. It makes for a good story.
So, yeah, be a good renter. I mean, having been on crews, man, if you can be a good renter, it makes for – these guys are busting their ass a lot of times to get these cars back together. So if you can be a good renter – be conscious of that. Again, too, yes, you are a customer, 100%, but you're also on a team, and you're also trying to have a good time. And one thing, not to run long, but somebody will experience this. So I'm just going to prep you right now. You will get on a team, and there's going to be one driver that ruins it for everybody. Either they're a complete ass or they're crashing the car. Just know, I'm telling you right now, you can send donations because I'm right. And when you find out, there will be one weekend where somebody on the team, some driver, you will not get along with, you will not like, and unfortunately, that's just part of endurance racing. You don't really experience that when you're driving, sprint racing and you're by yourself. But don't let that one guy ruin your experience. And just the following week, you can tell the team, hey, let's find a new guy, or you can find a new team yourself. But there's a couple of these guys going around the paddock, and unfortunately, I can't.
You're trying so hard not to name drop.
I can't say their names because I like to be a statesman of the sport. So
you have to be.
Yeah. So when you run into that guy, you can DM me and let me know who he was, and I'll tell you if I agree or not. So that is episode number 2 of Passing Under Yellow. So yeah, that is how you find a team and how you sign a contract. Thank you again to Hawk Performance, Hawk Racing Brakes. Actually, I have a coupon, so I will drop that in the description if you want to save on your next order of Hawk brake pads. And yeah, we'll see. Tune in for, I guess that'd be episode 3.
Yeah, and, don't miss episode 3.
So we're new to YouTube, so I guess you gotta like and subscribe and share this with your friends. And yeah, if you have any questions at all about making the transition from track days to racing, feel free to reach out to me, make a comment, and we'll try to answer them all you can. But yeah, we'll see you at the next episode.